but also the Tulsa Regional Chamber, which does the same thing on a regional effort. I will say you can see from the graph that we had kind of a downturn, if you will, in 2015. That's certainly not a reflection of anything that the community or our office was doing right or wrong at the time. I think that was more a reflection of the economy at the time. Our expansion project activity, which you'll see in the next slide, kind of is reflective of that as well. You know, we had a kind of a downturn in the energy sector that year, and you know, if I had to guess, it may have also played into the fact that, you know, the upcoming pending presidential election as well. Companies were kind of on hold for a while. We're starting to see that rebound now. You can see the last several years that our project activity has started to increase, and I expect to see that moving forward as well. This is kind of an overview of our expansion project activity. Last year alone, we were 32 expansion projects. 16 of those were new projects that we worked throughout the year. Sometimes these expansion projects can go real fast. Sometimes they can, you know, open and close within 2 months. Sometimes we have projects that go on for 4 or 5 years. And so we did complete, and I think it's important to note that, you know, we track not only new projects and project announcements rather, but we also track the projects as they go through. We want to make sure that these projects actually, I mean, we can have an announcement every other day, but we want to make sure that these jobs are being created and that the investments that these companies are making actually go onto the tax rolls. And so we follow these projects throughout the completion of the project. We did have 16 projects that completed last year. Those projects alone created 50 new jobs at an average salary of $39,000 a year, and also $206 million in new investment. That's a significant number. Anytime, you know, it kind of hurts my pride a little bit whenever, you know, I hear, you know, out in the community that nothing's going on in Muskogee, because 50 jobs and $206 million investment. You know, you can say we don't get a Dow tile every day. Well, I can tell you that that's several Dow tiles. Not in jobs, but certainly in investment. And this is investment that goes onto the tax rolls that helps support our schools, our EMS, our vocational systems, et cetera. So very good stuff. We did, on that same note, we did have some announcements this year. We had a new startup metal fabrication company that started, Universal Steel Contractors. They're creating 18 new jobs at $39,000 a year. That's a great example of the kind of environment that we are trying to create here in Muskogee, and the environment that has been here in Muskogee. We have several family-owned companies that have been in Muskogee for 3 and 4 generations, and I think this is a testament to, you know, how good Muskogee is to do business in. We also had 2 existing manufacturers that announced projects this year. Valorex Star at the Port of Muskogee, they announced 130 jobs. Those are an average salary of $59,000 a year. And also Advantage TerraFab. They purchased, many of you know, the former Packaging Corporation of America building. They're doing a $3.5 million investment in creating 40 new jobs. So just alone in the announcements that we've created this year, it's 178 jobs, $58,000 a year in average salary, and $3.5 million investment. So good things are happening in Muskogee, and we're pleased to be a part of that. One of the other things that we do to help support our existing industries and make sure that there is an environment here in Muskogee that will help them to grow is through our Greater Muskogee Manufacturers Alliance. And thank you to those of you who have participated in those meetings. If you hadn't had the opportunity, then please let me know. I'll make sure that you're on the list if you're not on the list. We do have 2 meetings a year, which we open up to all of our partners as well. This is a really great opportunity, and I'll say that this, our GMMA, our Greater Muskogee Manufacturers Alliance, started in July of 2008. So this year in July, it'll be 10 years old. And we're still having great attendance at these meetings. And so I think that's it's proof that these manufacturers are finding value in participating in this group. The good thing about this, and the reason why it's so important for us to continue to encourage this, is that This gives our manufacturers an opportunity to not only network with each other and learn best practices. 10 years ago, it was always amazing to me to go into these plants and find that these companies don't even know their next door neighbor. How do we expect them to do business with each other if they don't even know who their neighbors are or what they do? And so it's really a great opportunity for them to find out how they might be able to work together, what business-to-business opportunities there are for them. And so we're pleased to have tracked several of those companies that are now doing business with one another. That's the ultimate goal, is that as these companies start to do business with each other, they're spending a lot of money each and every year. We want to make sure that they're spending that money with each other, that money stays here in Muskogee, and that they're allowed to, they're then have the opportunity to continue to invest in their business, add jobs, add investment. Lastly, but certainly not least, is our workforce development efforts. Many of you have participated in our Dream It, Do It committee meetings and efforts, and have hopefully been made aware of those through various media sources. The Phoenix has been really good at help picking up these stories as well. But we now have, as of October of this last year, a dedicated workforce development manager on staff. That's Carrie Keene, and she's doing an outstanding job with that program now. But we've had the opportunity to do plant tours not only for Muskogee Public Schools, but also for the Rougher Alternative Academy last year. We also did 14 classroom visits and spoke to over 100 students throughout the various schools in Muskogee County. A couple of years ago, many of you participated in the Allison Larson TADSO Consulting Targeted Industry Analysis and Competitiveness Assessment that we worked on several years ago. If you remember, we were given a kind of a scorecard of different things that we were good at and things that we could be probably doing better on. One of our lowest scores that came out of that report card was in the area of workforce development. Workforce availability and workforce scalability are the number one and number two issues that our company is looking for whenever they're choosing a community to locate their project in. And, the biggest concern that they have is, where am I going to find my future workforce? And when asked that question of us a couple of years ago, we really didn't have an answer for them. And so as a result, we started working together. We have some really great groups. We have the Muskogee Area Education Consortium, made up of all of the superintendents of our area schools and deans of our area colleges, as well as our career tech. And then we also have this Greater Muskogee Manufacturing Alliance. And why these two groups aren't working together to ensure that there will be a future pipeline of workers was definitely missed upon us. Well, no longer. So these, through our Dream It, Do It committee, which is our workforce development effort, we now have an answer to companies and to consultants who ask us, where am I going to find workers 10 years from now? We're working on it. And so this is definitely something that they want to hear. If you didn't get to go to the annual math and engineering competition that was held last week, I strongly encourage you to mark your calendars for the second week in February next year. It's an outstanding event. Muscogee's best and brightest 6th through 12th graders are out there, and we are ensuring that there are manufacturers there to help show them that there are career opportunities available in manufacturing, and not only that there are available career opportunities here in Muskogee. With that, I think that's the last slide I have, and I'd be happy to answer any questions you may have.
I'd like to say that I'm kind of looking forward to your efforts to promote our manufacturers and pass along the good things that are going on to our citizens of Muskogee, getting the word out. And Ivory's a little shy and bashful, but he and I both wanted to thank you for the wonderful presentation you gave the other afternoon.
I appreciate you being there.
And I'm still going to work on a question that you can't answer.
I look forward to it.
Any other questions? Okay, just accept this, right?
No
We don't have to vote?
No action.
Huh?
No action is needed.
No actions needed. Move to number 4.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Consider approval of receiving donated funds for the months of December 2017 in the amount of $2,588.60 and January 2018 in the amount of $242 for a total of $2,830.60 for the city's animal shelter sponsorship program as per the attached list, or take necessary action.
Chief Eskridge.
Chairman, Council, as she read, we received in December $2,588.60. In January, it went down considerably to $242 for an aggregate total of $2,830.60 for our sponsorship program. This helps with this adoption, spaying, neutering, and it really serves a really good program out there, and I would encourage us to accept these funds.
Move for approval.
Second.
Any questions? Roll call.
Deputy Mayor James Scully.
Yes.
Janie Boydston.
Yes.
Patrick Kale.
Yes.
Marlon Coleman.
Yes.
Wayne Johnson.
Yes.
Ivory Van.
Yes.
Dan Hall.
Yes.
Mayor Coburn.
Yes. Motion carries. We're adjourned. And I want to appreciate y'all and thank y'all for the opportunity of doing that.
Sure. Did very well.
Did a great job.
Very good. Very good. No
And
problem.
for those that can't see, that was Dan Hall.
Said thank you about anything.
They know my voice. No.
All right. We'll now call to order the Public Works Committee meeting. Item number 1.
Consider approval of Public Works Committee minutes of February the 5th, 2018.
Any additions or changes?
Move for approval. Second.
Got a motion and a second. Any discussion? Roll call.
Deputy Mayor James Scully.
Yes.
Janie Boydston.
Yes.
Patrick Kale.
Yes.
Marlon Coleman.
Yes.
Wayne Johnson.
Yes.
Ivory Van.
Yes.
Dan Hall.
Yes.
Mayor Coburn.
Yes.
Motion carries. Item number 2.
Consider approval of the appointment of Jack Mark Hughes to serve a 3-year term on the War Memorial Trust Authority beginning March 1st, 2018 and ending February the 28th, 2021, replacing Kim Chrysler, or take other necessary action.
Mr. Kale.
I'd like to, first of all, thank Mr. Hughes for his service. He's a retired Marine Lieutenant Colonel and has served in several conflicts. I think he's an excellent choice, and he seems excited to serve and interested, and I recommend that we approve his appointment.
Second.
Got a motion and a second. Any discussion or comments? Roll call.
Deputy Mayor James Scully.
Yes.
Janie Boydston.
Yes.
Patrick Kale.
Yes.
Marlon Coleman.
Yes.
Wayne Johnson.
Yes.
Ivory Van.
Yes.
Dan Hall.
Yes.
Mayor Coburn.
Yes.
And the motion carries. Item number 3.
Receive update on code enforcement plan, consider approval of updated fees, and take other necessary action.
Mr. Miller.
Yes, as Chief Eskridge comes forward, I just want to remind you, we had last fall a request for an updated code enforcement plan for the city of Muskogee. We produced, this big old fat document that you guys have had a chance to look at. There are several recommendations in that document. One of those was increased fees associated with code enforcement activities, basically to help reflect at least more of the cost, certainly not all of, but more of the cost associated, so that we're not subsidizing those activities with tax dollars, but the people that are receiving the benefit are actually bearing the brunt of those costs. So we wanted to give you the update on what we're doing to implement the plan, and then we'll talk about those fees at the end.
Chief.
Mr. Chairman, Council, let me introduce Deputy Chief Reggie Cotton to start this off, and then he will introduce Lieutenant Kevin Hammond. So, Chief.
To the mayor and the council, just want to say that the benefits of this code enforcement plan are really weighty for the city. Better quality of life, lower crime rates, positive perception of the city, improved aesthetics, and community pride. Lieutenant Kevin Hammonds is going to show you a PowerPoint presentation that is going to show you the actual code enforcement plan that we have going on at this point in time. Lieutenant Hammonds.
Thank you for giving us a few minutes of your time. I'd like to thank Mr. Garvin. He told me I could take 35 or 40 minutes. Isn't that right? Okay, he said no more than 50.
What?
13. I'm down to 13 now. Okay.
You got my attention now.
Anyway, about a year and a half ago, the Muskogee Police Department took over code enforcement, and With that, began a learning curve and we're still learning. There's a lot more to code enforcement and inspections and environmental control than we ever knew. But anyway, I'm going to give you a brief breakdown of some of the things that we've done so far. This is by no means the whole part of the plan. As you know, you received a binder that's about this thick with a whole lot of information in it. So we've started on this, and anyway, we're going to go over a little bit of it tonight. Code enforcement, we developed an objective through community policing. Muskogee Police Department code enforcement will work hand in hand to improve or eliminate blight to reduce high crime areas. We'll work together to prevent decay of residential properties, improve the appearance of commercial properties, to present a better overall image of the city of Muskogee. We also developed a vision statement. Community preservation and education to ensure that Muskogee is a safe, family-friendly community and a great place to live, work, and play. July 3rd, 2017, Mr. Miller requested a study that reflected the current operations and policy for code enforcement, planning and inspections, and environmental control. With that, we met with the code enforcement officers that's been doing this a while. We met Mr. Dan Hurd, who was the supervisor of code enforcement for a while, and we met with Jason Green, who's over environmental control, to gather ideas that we could use to save money and to help improve our operations, make things smoother and make things look better. It included suggested improvements to the current protocol of each division, and these are the things that we've done so far. Phone lines have been transferred from the code enforcement officer to the records division of the Muskogee Police Department between the hours of 9 and 4 p.m. daily. Our code enforcement clerk had some legal problems and is no longer with the city. So we've now transferred those phone calls over to Mr. Mike Brawley, who does a good job answering them. He's been trained as a code enforcement officer, and he knows how to input the calls and also do some of the reports that we need. This is one that was presented by Mr. Hurd. Sign compliance has been transferred to the inspections division. They have access to the building permits, which is the numbers that are used on the signs. So they have better access to it than the code officers would. So they enforce that. Starting April 1st, 2 code enforcement officers will change the hours to 9 to 6 daily instead of 8 to 5. That'll allow us better coverage and allow us to make contact with people at home instead of just trying to send them letters. It's a lot easier to knock on the door and say, hey, you need to mow your yard, than it is to send a letter out. And before, we just posted properties 1 day a week on Mondays. Then we'd re-inspect 10 days later on a Thursday. Now we post properties every day. We re-inspect every day. So it keeps the process moving a little quicker. We've increased our focus on the Highway 69 and Main Street corridors. Now mowing of the turnpike's been contracted to a private company, which is saving us some time and money and allowing the city employees to work in other areas. We're currently using CDBG grant funds with matching money to clean up large dilapidated areas. Some of our next steps, we're going to set up meetings with iWorks, which is a software company that does code enforcement software, and this software will allow the code officers to stay out in the field. They can work a case from start to finish off their tablet if this is approved. We have some things to look at, so we're going to set up some meetings with them, let them demo it for us, and see if it would work with our the current software and programs we have within the city. We're going to implement work crews from the Eddie Warrior Correctional Center. We've had a few meetings with the warden and deputy warden. They've told us what we need to do, the legal parts of it. This is going to be managed by environmental control. Jason Green is already working on equipment, trailer, van, things like that. This will be a cost per inmate, $120 a month to the city. So it's minor, very minimal cost, and they can clean up any public property. We're going to examine the cost and fees associated with code enforcement. Apply for DEQ grant for equipment, which I appreciate you guys approving that last Monday night. We're going to look at possible land banking in areas where multiple liens exist. Right now, we're owed in the neighborhood of $300,000 in liens on properties in the city, and that's just in the past 3 years. So that we may look at liens if we have a group of liens in the same area where they would benefit the city, as property that the city could develop or clean up and improve, then we're going to look at that. And we're going to begin applying for City Muskogee Foundation money for cleaning up large areas instead of using CDBG grant money. It's a faster process, would allow us to clean up more properties quicker if we get approved for this money. Here's some numbers from 2017. Overall, we did 8,100 inspections of properties. Now, that number, the code officer goes out, they inspect it. They send out a letter, make contact. They go out and re-inspect it after the abatement contractor's cleaned it up. So one property may be inspected 2 or 3 times. But basically, each code officer works over 1,000 cases a year, or approximately 1,000 cases a year. You have to realize that each case could take 30 days to process. From the time they start it till the time it gets abated, to the time it gets mowed, and either the customer pays or the customer mows it, or we file a lien, it can take anywhere from 30 to 45 days. We mowed approximately 624 yards, sprayed 160 yards, and hauled off 693 yards of debris. Here's an example of a property on the west side before we mowed it. There's an example of it afterwards, so our contractor does a good job. Here's a property over on the east side, and this doesn't even begin to describe what the whole property looked like. This is just one picture. We hauled over 100 yards of debris off this one property.
Wow.
There's what it looks like now. We were talking about administrative fees. This is something that is very important for us here at the city. After going to a code enforcement conference last fall, I learned that Muskogee was way behind the curve. We're charging $80 for an administrative fee for mowing and trash dilapidation. Now you got to realize you're sending a code officer out there one time to look at it and take pictures, come back and they process it. They go back out and inspect it again, then the contractor gets it, they inspect it again, then it goes to the clerk's office and they file liens on it. The liens cost $13 a piece to file. Many times we're releasing those liens when the property goes to county sale, so there's another $13 to remove that lien. So as you can see, $80 is by no means even coming close to covering the cost of one officer going out and abating a property. As you can see, there's Shawnee charges $100 for both, Bigsby $300, Sand Springs $200 and $400, Norman $150 and $300. What we're proposing, and we've given this to Mr. Stewart, is changing our fees to $150 and $300. Now, this will be close to covering our cost. I mean, it's not going to completely cover it, but it'll be close to it. It'll put us more in line to help recover some of the funds that we spend daily in code enforcement. That's basically what we've done so far. One thing that we'll be asking for. Does anyone have any questions?
Well, I think you answered my first question, and that was, I guess we're documenting everything with photographs.
Yes.
And I'm assuming if they get some kind of a pad type software, it'll take the pictures and upload them. It'll all just be where they need to be. My other observation is the forward thinking. Yeah.
We have some properties that are coming along down around Shawnee, a few of them down in the Reeves Addition. We get into a lot of situations to where we can't find the owners of the property. They've either passed away, moved to another state. The county doesn't have good records on them, and we basically become a mowing service for them. So there's several properties in different areas of town that we might be able to do that with.
That brings me to another question that Mr. Tucker might answer. Do we run into much problem with folks that may be long gone, dead, or we can't locate them at all, and there's no way to catch up with them or whatever legally? Do we run into any walls, or have we got it figured out to
No, I mean, that's always a possibility. And what will end up happening is if we can't find them, the county taxman can't find them either. And so several of those are what have made it back to our hands through the county tax sales. So under state law, we have the authority to file a foreclosure action on it or to sue the individual personally. Of course, if you can't find them, you can't really attempt to collect anything based upon that. Many years ago, before I took over, I have been told that there were actions that the then city attorney, Steve Kasparis, filed on many of these cases for weed and grass abatements, as well as some dilapidated personal properties. And at that time, the cost of prosecution, because it's about $260 for the cost of filing a lawsuit, that was never collected. And so that practice stopped probably about 15 years ago. And so we do our very best to collect what we can, but in some cases it's a cost of doing business because we simply can't locate the person, and the property will eventually revert to us. Does that answer your question?
Eventually, I guess that's what I wanted to know is if, from my perspective, the sooner the better that we sue or foreclose or what have you to acquire a piece of property and then try to figure out the best thing to do with it. And naturally, if we can put kind of sort of blocks or half blocks or whatever together, it really opens up our options as to what we might do that would be attractive for everybody, the community.
And then, of course, there's these things go to tax sale, whatever, 4 years, something like that. If the
I think it's 3.
Anyway, if they haven't paid their taxes and we have liens, what we've been doing right now is lifting the lien so the property could be sold. And so it may be, we might be able to do something if we don't lift the lien, we could acquire the property that way.
And that's
We
what
could always bid our tax lien.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's what I mean about strategic land banking. If we've got something going there, let's not let something go to Patrick that picks it up at the sale. Let's try to
Absolutely.
think about it strategically.
Sure.
Thank you.
How many officers, is it Muskogee PD officers that are doing this?
No, sir. The code enforcement officers, there's 4 code officers that work for the city through, well, like I said, they used to be part of the inspections division and things like that, but there's 4 code officers that we have the city divided in 4 quadrants. They each have a quadrant that they work. So they're not police department employees.
Can they cross over into another quadrant if something needs to be? Because there was a little rumor that a guy said, "Hey, can you go look at this one?" And they go, "That's not in my my area," and so they wouldn't go across the street and look at it.
It's been taken care of.
Okay.
We were aware of that.
All right, just making sure. And you got 4 areas, so you answered that. Early on, you mentioned something about community-based policing.
Yes, sir.
I'm pretty familiar with this form of policing, but some of these guys up here may not be. Explain to us how that's going to lower our crime rate.
Well, the use of code enforcement, community-based policing is code enforcement can go out there. They see a property that is, they see a property that's overgrown. There's, say, transients living in the house and things like that. We abate the property, we get it cleaned up, get those people out of there, board up the property. So that property's taken out of the equation. That's no longer considered a piece of crime property. In addition, the code officers being out there every day, they call for officers all the time. They get out there and they see a problem, they'll call an officer over there and help deal with a problem of crime. So the code officers work with the police department. The police officers are also, if they see an area, let's say they see a yard over here that's a bunch of trash and debris and weeds that needs to be cleaned up, they have a form they fill out and they give it to me, and then I give it to the appropriate code officer, and then we start the abatement process, we get it cleaned up. So we're using the code officers to help clean up, blighted areas or properties that can be used for crime, for, cooking meth or selling dope or things like that. We clean them up and it takes them out of the equation. So that's how the code officers are working with the police department. Go ahead, Chief.
I would just like to say that there is a corollary between degraded areas and crime. You clean, which ones comes first, it's hard to tell. But if we start cleaning up Muskogee, we think that's going to have an impact on crime. It's going to move it somewhere else. And eventually, the part about community policing is to involve the beat officer as well. But that's going to take some time in transitioning into that mode for everybody to think that. But the real issue is that there is a large amount of property in Muskogee that's been left unattended, has fallen into decay, and that's where we make a lot of calls, and that's where we want to work to better Muskogee. So that's where we're going with some of this.
And I really like community-based policing projects. I think that it impacts our community on the positive side. Not only does it get officers out where they're interacting with the public, where they're not normally going from house to house or neighborhood to neighborhood and being seen, and sometimes it puts the police officer out in the neighborhood and communicating with the people that live in those neighborhoods and still just driving by in a police car. It's kind of hard to have a conversation with a neighborhood if you're driving by at 20 miles an hour or 30 miles an hour by their house going, hey, how's everything going? And you're just going by. Sometimes it helps when these officers get out and are being seen, and the neighbor sees those officers go to these derelict houses or something, and the neighbors walk across the street, and sometimes they give them all kinds of good information that leads to stopping other crimes or what's actually going on in that neighborhood. So I just wanted them to talk to you a little bit about it because, like I said, I'm in favor of community-based policing, and it will help our community. I'm also a big fan of putting more officers in neighborhoods and being seen a lot. I know that sometimes that causes phone calls to the chief. Why you got so many officers in our neighborhood, and why are they there? Sometimes officers' presence makes some people feel safer. Sometimes you get those phone calls because it makes bad guys feel a little nervous and they don't like it there. So I feel like they're doing a good job, and I like this.
I've got another question. Are these code enforcement officers, are they afforded or allowed to carry police officer type of protection or gear?
No, they're not. We are in the process of trying to get them radios, though, at this time.
Have you guys looked at analysis as to whether that's needed or beneficial or not beneficial? Or
Well, as far as radios are concerned, I think it's a security issue. If there's a disgruntled citizen that doesn't want to get a ticket or doesn't want the code enforcement officers on their property, the code enforcement officer can quickly radio for help, either one of the staff that's in the police station, or a police officer that's actually out there in the field.
okay,
So that's what we're actually asking for the radios at some point in time.
I think that's a good idea.
One of the things I also wanted to
At
say
the
is
least.
everything that everybody said was correct, and previous research shows that community policing, code enforcement, keeping communities safer, keeping them cleaner makes them safer. So we're going to be doing data analysis also as we collect some of the stats from cleaning up these neighborhoods to make sure that we're doing everything that we're supposed to be doing and making sure our efforts are not in vain.
I had a couple of questions. One of the original reasons for moving them to the police department was hopefully through our neighborhood policing, there would be better communications between our neighborhood policing and our code enforcement. Have you seen that occur?
As far as the code enforcement officers and the police officers communicating with each other?
Yes, sir.
Oh, yes. We're still training the police officers, okay, because they're cops, okay, and they're used to dealing with crime. They're not used to dealing with, oh, that property looks bad, I need to notify somebody. Like I said, I've gone out and spoken to the shifts. I've given them the forms. I have officers, some of them will just take a picture of it and send it to me, say, hey, this is at 24th and Old Mulgee or whatever, and that's great, okay? We're getting there.
That's just
Yeah.
extremely encouraging, just to know
Yes.
that there's conversation going
Yes.
on. Because, that was one of the goals, that there's just conversation going on, that there is a potential challenge out
See,
there.
the officers, they can issue the same citations the code officers
Yeah,
can.
yeah.
So there's some education going on. Police officers have a high volume of calls, so
Yes.
it's not always
Yep.
effective. But on day shift, I have 2 or 3 officers on each day shift that are real good about calling me or sending me a picture, filling out the form and giving it to us, and so it's improving.
Yeah, the big
Just
challenge
takes
is
time.
if the police are constantly going to this problem area, that they can report that to code enforcement, and they're communicating on that. So that's great to hear that communication has taken place. The other thing is, when a code enforcement officer goes out to a location, most of the way that we're doing enforcement is on a complaint basis. If they're called out on a complaint basis, do they travel that neighborhood, or do they just go to that complaint?
Go ahead.
Actually, we are doing the complaints on a complaint basis, but we are actively patrolling each quadrant looking for those items to report back or to write a citation or write a letter or basically abate those properties.
Okay.
So we are doing those
So
things
we
as
do a
well.
block basis?
Yes.
Not just, so if we go to a complaint basis at 12:05, we're also looking at 12:08?
Yes.
Okay.
We are.
Software, and I know that helps the effectiveness of those code enforcement officers. My understanding, that is built into this year's budget?
We have not in the current fiscal year. That's something we're looking at as we go into
Okay, so it's not
fiscal year
built into this
2019. That's
current
correct.
fiscal
That's
year.
right. We're evaluating it this fiscal
Okay.
year to try and make sure that it's the right system, that will do what we want to do, and not. Sometimes you can get a software program that might cause you to do more work than you otherwise would have to. So we're trying to make sure it makes us more efficient.
Okay,
But if we're able to find that, it will be part of a budget that we bring forward.
okay. Great information in your PowerPoint. I was wanting to see if we could make that available in our Dropbox, where we could have those numbers.
Yes, we will.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
We do.
Mr. Chairman, Mr. Chairman, I'll be recognized.
I just want, before we do need a motion to increase the fees, is that correct?
Yes,
Is that what that's?
yes, exactly.
Mr. Van, I just want to make sure that this wasn't just a report, that there were some fees and there were some actionable items. So
Yes.
the floor is yours.
I dealt with code enforcement, all summer long, and Mr. Hammond, Mr. Cotton, Chief Cotton, and I think they're doing a very good job since they combined it. But one problem I see is here in the city is that, just like Main Street you were talking about, focusing on Main Street and 69. The other day, Roy's crew went down on Main Street. All this trash, they picked it up on a person's property. But the problem is, it's right there by that storage building going back south. You got all these trees, and I told them up here probably 2 or 3 times that we need some kind of something that we can get in there and get. We got to go on that property, get these trees out the way, and get it cleaned up. I mean, really cleaned up, because Main Street definitely needs to be cleaned up. And also, me and Mr. Miller, we went out one day, and you remember Mr. Miller when we went and looked at that house? Well, it had all that trash in the backyard.
Yep.
That trash is still in the backyard. And it was something you said that we couldn't go, we wasn't allowed to go in the backyard, but come to find out, we can go in the backyard. So I want to make sure, get a clarification tonight. We can go in people's backyard to clean the trash up? Yes, sir.
To the microphone, please, sir. Mr. Lieutenant.
Okay, we're where I think it's 711 Independence. It's 707 or 711. I don't remember what the exact address is. We're aware of that. When we first took over, there was some misconception about what we could do legally behind people's houses and things like that. Since then, we found that we can go in there and abate some of that and clean that up. We ran into a little bit of problem because there was still somebody there. That was a particular house that we have done search warrants on, and we have found individuals there since then. And so there's a little bit of safety we're concerned about. But I think since then that person's moved out, I think that may be one of the properties that we're talking about cleaning up during the cleanup. So we're going to try to get that one taken care of. We're getting ready to start abating some more properties, and so I'll check on that and see if we can take care of that.
Okay.
Okay.
It's been like that all summer long. And the front yard looks good, but like I said, we've got some more properties also on that street that's in pretty bad shape that we're just now going back over and looking at it and,
Well, I'm not trying to make excuses. We lost our code officer that worked that district. And so we have now hired a new code officer, and March 1st she'll be out on her own. She's done a good job so far in her training, and so we'll get her concentrating on that area.
Now, that program I know Officer Garner was up here the other day, that program, they can go in with your chainsaws and stuff and cut trees and this and that?
Yes, if they get permission from the property owner.
Okay. Because we got one property down there on South Main that we had a hard time with it. We did.
Mm-hmm.
And they keep the front yard part of it cut. But all these trees, you know what I'm talking about. All these trees is back there making it look so tacky.
Well, we just have to be careful about using city employees and stuff to clean up private property without permission, as far as cutting down trees and things like that. Picking up trash is one thing, but cutting down trees presents a legal issue, if I'm correct. Okay.
So that's my only thing. See, I worked with the county this past, a year or so ago. They had a group of people to go around. If they got these county lots, they had backhoes and dump trucks. They would go in there and clean their lots up, get rid of all these trees. There's a lot of lots on the south side of town that me and Mr. Kelly Garrett worked on together.
Those are lots owned by the county?
They were owned by the county, and they went in there, and they had the equipment to clean them up. And that's what the city needs, is the equipment to go in there, like we got the equipment to go in there and mow somebody. But the contractor we have, he doesn't have that kind of equipment to do that. But I'm just saying, I've said time and time again, that we need to have something like that in place to get some of these properties cleaned up and really get them looking good, and especially Main Street. I'm going to concentrate these next 4 years on Main Street.
Okay.
I'll turn the floor back over. Go ahead.
I'd like to make a motion to approve the adjustment of the code enforcement rates as recommended.
Second. A motion and a second. Any discussion or comments?
Is this where they actually need to be, or do they need to be a little higher? On that, like that one place, I think it was Bixby, had it 300. Do we need to have it at 300, or do we need to leave it at 150?
I think 150 and 300 will be a good start. What we'll do is if you approve this and we get a date of implement it, we'll start from that point, and we'll start seeing how things go. We'll monitor it for 6 months and a year, and we may come back and request some adjustments at that time, but I think right now 150 and 300 would be acceptable.
Yeah, I'm good with that.
Okay. Any other comments?
Thank you.
Roll call. Deputy Mayor James Scully.
Yes.
Janie Boydston.
Yes.
Patrick Kale.
Yes?
Marlon Coleman.
Yes.
Wayne Johnson.
Yes.
Ivory Van.
Yes.
Dan Hall.
Yes.
Mayor Coburn.
Yes.
And the motion carries. Seeing that no citizens had signed up to speak to this committee, we are adjourned.
Now I call to order the special call meeting of Muskogee City Council. Roll call, please.
Mayor Bob Coburn.
Here.
Deputy Mayor James Scully.
Here.
Dan Hall.
Here.
Still here.
Marlon Coleman.
Here.
Janie Boydston.
Here.
Wayne Johnson.
Here.
Patrick Kale.
Here?
Ivory Van.
Here.
Derek Reed.
Item number 1.
Consider approval to receive the certified election results from the Secretary of the Muskogee County Election Board for the 2018 City Council and mayoral race pursuant to the City Council Resolution number 2707 and state election laws, or take other necessary action.
Mr. Tucker.
Mayor, members of the council, state election law requires, since the election was managed by the county, that the county provide the results of that election certified to the city. The reason we've had an agenda item put on to ask for your approval to do that is to create an official record of these election results. So in the mayoral race, we had 15 precincts with a total of 2,992 votes cast, 1,531 for Bob Coburn, 1,461 for Earl Wayne Divalbis. For the Ward 2 election, with 4 precincts, 973 votes were cast, 557 for Jamie Lynn Stout, and 416 for Stacy Lynn Alexander. For Ward 3, there were 6 precincts for 578 votes cast, 142 for D. Boots, 324 for Ivory Lewis Van, and 112 for Randall K. Howard. With that, I'm happy to answer any questions, but I recommend approval to receive the results.
Well, before I make a motion to approve, I'd like to know can we retroactively go back and award past counselors with these nice, fancy certificates of being elected?
Talk to the county about
Those were
that.
provided by those were provided by the county. But we can surely type you up
They
one.
sure are nice. It looks good, Mayor.
Did you not get one, Patrick?
I move for approval.
Did you not get one?
No.
I second. I'm sorry. I'll show you. I'll give you mine.
We have a motion, we have a second, is that right? Is there
Yes.
any comment or discussion? Roll call.
Deputy Mayor James Scully.
Yes.
Janie Boydston.
Yes.
Patrick Kale.
Yes.
Marlon Coleman.
Yes.
Wayne Johnson.
Yes.
Ivory Van.
Yes.
Dan Hall.
Yes.
Mayor Coburn.
Yes, the motion carries, and that concludes our agenda for the special call meeting. Thank you.